All right. Hello and welcome, everyone, to our next panel. We have Now What, which is our operations panel. My name is RJ Hensel. I am the co-president of Sport by NC, a senior here, double majoring in sport management and marketing. So first, I would like to introduce our panelists. First, we have Lauren Mroz, the associate manager and event coordinator for the NBA. We have Justin Roach, a 2014 North Central graduate, who is the National Director of Events and Entertainment for the Sports Facility Advisory. Next, we have Doug Czuryo, the Senior Director of Finance and Administration for the Kane County Cougars. And then Brandon Haney, a Championship Director for the PGA of America. So thank you all for joining us this morning. So let's just get started. My first question for all of you is kind of just tell us all about how your organization has adapted and overcame to the given circumstances of this past year. Why don't we start with Justin?
Great. Well, I appreciate you guys having me here. It's great to be part of this, especially coming from North Central and graduating with sports management there. So, yeah, it's been a full year, and our organization manages approximately 20 facilities across the country, and so each one of those facilities ranges in its type, but most of them have a high volume of fields and a high volume of courts to support large sports tourism type of events, and so really once the pandemic came and things started shutting down, we had to figure out and manage through all the 700 employees that we have across the country within our facilities, how we get through the shutdown, and then ultimately how we reopen and how we do that safely. And so we've learned a lot in a very short amount of time, and ultimately where we are today is we have safe protocols to reopen our facilities, and all of our facilities across the country are open in some capacity, many with limitations on capacity or spectators, but we're doing it safe and we're doing it right, and we are hosting events again and servicing the communities and supporting the communities that we have facilities in.
Doug?
So, it's funny how each of us are probably going to have a little bit of a different take on this, depending on when we started to shut down and when we started to have issues. For us, when everything started shutting down, we were 3 weeks from opening day last year. So we kind of, we approached it with, okay, just be ready for anything. At the beginning of this, I think everybody thought this was a, maybe month and a half, 2 month type thing. Everybody was talking about, even Major League Baseball is like, we're gonna pause spring training. We're hoping to get going again, maybe, May 1st or Memorial Day or something. And then it just kept going farther and farther. So for us, it was strange. We lost, obviously, that entire season. And now we're getting ready for a season that's, for us, about 3 months away, but we know it's going to be, reduced capacities and things like that. But we tried to pivot and do what we could while still being ready for anything that might come our way. We did smaller events, tours of the stadium, movie nights, rented out the stadium for local teams to play. Just did anything we could to kind of, bring in a little bit of money while waiting to see what would happen. Obviously, by mid-May, it was pretty obvious we weren't going to play. So it was just kind of a survival mode for a year to try to get to this point, to where we're now ready for a season. We did that, through a bunch of different avenues, but it's still kind of, all of this is still still evolving. We're 3 months from opening day, and we're planning for a certain amount of people in the stadium and hoping it's going to be more, but you can't sell more and make people upset. But for us, because of when it happened, it was kind of survival mode. Just do what we can to get to this point, stay relevant a little bit. So now that we're ready to play again, people are thinking about us again.
Brandon?
Hello, everybody. It was a very challenging year for our events. So I'm in the championships department with the PGA of America. So we have the PGA Championship, our KPMG Senior PGA Championship, our KPMG Women's PGA Championship, and the Ryder Cup. All four majorly affected by the pandemic. Our PGA Championship was postponed from May to August, held without spectators in California. Our KitchenAid Senior PGA Championship was unfortunately canceled in Michigan. Our KPMG Women's PGA was postponed from June to October, held without spectators. And our Ryder Cup was postponed from August 2020 to August of 2021. So we learned a lot. Having to host some major championships without spectators brought its own challenge in creating the bubble within the players and not allowing everyone in. We did them with success. We learned a lot, and then still dealing with that this year. It's funny. We joke about it a lot with us. Our finance or our technology department had the forecast right before the pandemic hit that we switched platforms from Microsoft to Google. So we're now completely in Google Sheets, Google, and all the Google Docs that really helped us with collaboration through not being in the offices, and all of our offices spread out throughout the country. So that was a big part of our success in this last year, was being able to all work remotely but feel like we were all still together. So learned a lot from that, and our championships we're working closely with a lot of the other entities in golf, PGA Tour, the USGA, the Masters, to make sure we conduct our 2021 championships with health and safety of players and spectators alike being most important. And then working closely with local, state, federal authorities and health department and CDC, making sure we can host with everyone's safety as the most important part. So tough year, but we're excited to get golf going again here in 21.
Absolutely. Lauren?
Yeah, so I think many people can remember March 11th of last year. The Jazz and the Thunder were playing each other, and Rudy Gobert tested positive, and that was like the biggest story out there at the time. It was really the early stages of the pandemic, and nobody really knew, is this going to be a 2-week thing? Is this going to be a 2-month thing? And here we are almost a year later, and we're still obviously managing the effects of living in a global pandemic. I would say at the beginning, everything just kind of turned into how the rest of the world was, which, similar to what Brandon was saying, virtual, and just figuring out the world of Zoom and how we can all collaborate, which I think actually meetings throughout the league that would be happening maybe once or twice a year were now happening once or twice a week. And we had that opportunity to do that because of Zoom and all the other virtual ways of communication. So then it was basically, at the beginning, was more just figuring out where we stand and then what is the next step to go from here. And since the NBA is on such a has such a spotlight on it, a lot of people, I think, were looking to us for that guidance, and also just to see what we were capable of doing during a pandemic. So I would say mid-June, it was kind of obvious that we weren't going to be able to get back in our regular arenas and playing with fans, without fans, or anything. So that is when the idea of the bubble and the restart in Orlando really came to fruition, and same with the WNBA in Florida as well. Those two started in July and went through October. And then throughout that, again, just virtual meetings, virtually figuring everything out, trying to do our part in the communities to realize that the problems going on in the world aren't just surrounding and affecting basketball, they're affecting everybody. So figuring out how we can use our platform to help this situation outside of sports, and then going into getting the season started and dealing with the shortened period between the finals and the start of season. And then getting all of that testing, who's going to be playing with fans, who's not going to be, how are we going to be testing the players to make sure this is safe for them. And then also the G League bubble, which is going on now back in Orlando. So planning for that. And then we have our All-Star weekend a week from Sunday. So figuring out what the protocol and the needs were for that, where it can be, what our options are, what that comes across as from just a society standpoint. Like, is it the right thing to do to have an all-star game? We ended up deciding that it was, and is giving us an opportunity to give back to all the health and safety workers that have done such an amazing job over the past year, and really giving the sports world something to look forward to, and also working with other leagues that are going through similar situations and finding out what works best for everybody. But yeah, similar to everybody else, just figuring out the world of virtual everything. But I think we've been doing well so far.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, like you mentioned, Lauren, there's been a lot of similarities with all four of your answers. To kind of build on that, our next question is, how have you gone about balancing your ideal event with the evolving health guidelines? So why don't we start with Brandon?
Yeah, I'll speak specifically to Ryder Cup as where I'm at here at Whistling Straits. I mean, going into last year, we announced the postponement, knowing that fans weren't going to be possible for the Ryder Cup, and everyone who's familiar with the Ryder Cup knows fans are what make this event so special. So, giving us that extra year, we're still cautiously optimistic we're going to be able to host it in September at its fullest capacity. But knowing, decisions are going to have to be made in the near future so we can build out the right infrastructure to host the event, but also working closely with our medical provider, Prevea Health here in Wisconsin, Sheboygan County, state of Wisconsin, and the CDC, that we can develop plans and protocols for all of our corporate hospitality clients and our spectators alike to have them here and enjoy the Ryder Cup in its truest form. Fortunately, we've had the experience with the player side. We can create a bubble for the players and host the outdoor event of a golf tournament fairly well with them now. It's just getting the fans on the grounds that we're working through, and a lot more to come here. As Lauren said, we all have to be nimble, and things are changing. Seems like daily, if not hourly, with COVID. So we're staying flexible, and we'll adjust and hope everyone can get everyone here.
Doug?
So, this will be interesting for us because all the events we did last summer were, we're talking a few dozen, 150, 200, stuff like that. This will be the first time that we're getting back to, games and events with now thousands of people. Not obviously our full capacity, but, at 20%, that's still going to be, 2,200, 2,500 people in the stadium. So we're making our updates now. We're doing everything we can to continue to stay on top of health and safety guidelines, any, specific equipment that we need to have around the stadium to help out. We play at Northwestern Medicine Field, so we have a great partner with Northwestern Medicine to help us kind of navigate, anything in terms of protocols that we need to work with. We'll obviously work closely with the Kane County Health Department, do what we can to get ready for it, but also, as everybody said, be ready to pivot quickly, because it's going to change, probably 10 times before we get to opening day. We're going to plan for X, but it's going to be changed 10 times by then. And it's just, you have to really kind of roll with the punches and be ready for anything that comes your way. But that doesn't mean you can't, not plan now and just say, well, we'll figure it out once we're closer. We have to plan for something now and then just keep adjusting as we go through. So it'll be interesting because it is going to be the first time, opening day 3 months from now will be the first time we've had an event here in almost 20 months. To go that long without it. We're also, as a minor league team, we have no media money coming in. There's no TV money or anything to help us. We need people in the stands to make our money. So we're going to do what we can to fill it up to whatever the capacity is going to be allowed, on May 18th. And if the capacity increases, 3 weeks later, we're going to have to find a way to fill up those seats as well. So,
Lauren?
Yeah, similar to what Doug was saying, obviously our ideal event is to have 20,000 people in an arena watching a basketball game with no issues, but that's obviously not an option right now. So I think our ideal event is just making everything as normal as possible as we can. So that is getting certain people into arenas in certain areas where possible and giving them that. I think before, when I would go to a basketball game, like I would have no fear of the person next to me getting me sick like 2 years ago. So I think now is giving those fans that same sense of safety, knowing that either the person is far enough away, they're wearing a mask, or they've been tested. Something to that effect. I think from my perspective, working in VIP hospitality, it's difficult because the people I work with, team governors, executives, just other VIPs, they're used to a certain experience that isn't necessarily achievable, and being able to go up to their players whenever they want at an event like the Bubble or All-Star Game, being able to interact with anybody around them, and just kind of having that opportunity to go wherever they want. Because in a normal sense, absolutely, but in this sense, it's all health and safety. Everything is locked down in certain ways. But I think just the way my perspective has changed is I've had to just be in a greater sense of communication with those people. Everybody's understanding that we're in a different world now. So just being as communicative as possible so that when I do something or have a certain standard, it's for a reason, and explaining what that reason is. So nobody thinks that the experience is just changing because we want it to, and because we think it's a good idea. It's changing for a certain way. And also you'll notice like the NBA's bigger partners right now are places like Clorox and DoorDash, which might not necessarily have been the case a couple of years ago. So at an event, one of the first things on my checklist is who's getting tested, who are they going to be around, are those people also being tested, and to what extent, and also how many masks, how many Clorox packets, how many hand sanitizers do I need to make sure that this event is as stocked with health and safety things as possible. So I think that's just the main thing. And also a couple of years ago, our mindset was going green and getting reusable cups and everything like that, that would now be a health and safety nightmare. So instead of going completely away from something like a bottled water, it's like we can only use bottled water. We can only use prepackaged things that are going to be thrown away immediately. So I think just figuring out what we can do and how to make it seem as normal as possible, even when we know that it's not necessarily the normal that we were used to before.
Justin?
Yeah, really great answers. I would just kind of add on to that, that our company position has always been keeping the health and safety of the participants in the events and the families safe. And we've obviously taken that to another level with maintaining health and safety. But ultimately, we knew and figured out very quickly we have to adapt, and we have to be able to keep people as safe as we possibly can. And we need to communicate those safety measures to them so they feel safe. And so, working with the different state, county, municipal, and event guidelines for returning to play, as well as CDC recommendations. The 20 facilities we've managed across the country, it could be different in every state of how we comply with those things. But ultimately, we as an organization are charging ourselves with setting the standard of how we return to play safely with youth and amateur sports. And so within, really as a result of the pandemic, we created our own event companies. And so we currently have, for the last several months now, been running volleyball tournaments as well as lacrosse tournaments. And that gives us as an organization more control over those safety practices. In lacrosse, we partner very closely with U.S. Lacrosse. We have sanctioned tournaments. We follow their return to play guidelines, and we make sure that our events are being held as safely as they can. And so that's everything from doing wellness checks when people are coming in to the facility, maintaining social distancing at the event on the sidelines, and everything in between. Ultimately the goal though is to still keep the experience as best as we can. And we have seen over the last several months that within the youth and amateur sports space is that if you can provide a atmosphere that people feel safe in and can be safe in, there's a pent up demand for teams wanting to come out and play, done right. And so, an example of that is just last weekend, we ran a 130 team volleyball event in North Carolina at one of our own facilities at the Rocky Mountain Event Center. First time the facility's been open since the pandemic started, and it was only open because of the new practices and standards that we've been able to create and implement at the event. So whereas, previous events in the past would have been as many people in the building as we can and as many teams and as many games, now we're saying, look, we need to spread out the schedule. We're going to play a longer day. We're going to have waves of teams where people are going to be insulated and siloed into smaller groups and pods. They're going to come play their games. They're going to leave, and then the next wave comes in. And that's in addition to wellness checks and masks being worn at all times and social distancing for spectators, in addition to limited capacity of spectators and people within the building. So there's a lot of different measures that we put in place. But where we are now is, we're returning to play safely. And as we continue to climb out of the pandemic, that, those restrictions will be lifted or adjusted, and we're just going to have to be flexible and continue to adapt to be successful.
Yeah, great answers all around. There's obviously a lot that goes into it. So kind of changing pace a little bit, more of a lighthearted question. What is one aspect of your job that continually excites you? Let's start with Doug.
Sure. So this is like a pretty easy one to answer for me. I use the same example all the time, but for pretty much all of us, we get to see the fruits of our labor like every event. We're going to work all year trying to create great events with, fireworks and run the bases and giveaways and contests and games and all that. And then, 50, 55 times a year, I get to watch it actually happen. You get to see the smiles on the faces of the kids. Mom and dad are happy that the kids had a good time. So it just, getting to see that in action every night is great. I always say, somebody who's putting, TVs together on an assembly line, it's a great job, feeds the family, all that kind of stuff. They don't get to see the TV being enjoyed. They assume it's being enjoyed by somebody, but, 55 times a year, I get to watch thousands of people come into the stadium and enjoy themselves as long as the weather's nice, which, in Chicago is a little iffy sometimes, but when you put on an event and it goes well, you get to see that live, unfold in front of you. And I think that's still the most special thing about the job for me, is that you actually get to see that happen and know that, you were part of the team that kind of put that together and made it a successful night for a family who's choosing to, spend their time and money with you. And, it's important to make sure that they had a good time.
Brandon?
Yeah, I'll echo Doug's point. And generally speaking, working in sports, there's nothing better than spending all the time and effort you put into the event, seeing it come to fruition. And working in live sports, there's nothing better than that. But I guess specifically speaking to Ryder Cup, being in this virtual world and having to go through another year working towards the Ryder Cup after the postponement. That first tee shot on Friday morning, September 24th, when we kick this thing off, is what's keeping us going. Anyone who's familiar with the Ryder Cup knows the first tee is where it's at. So when we finally get that tee shot off, it's keeping us going. We're definitely excited for that and looking forward to that.
Lauren?
Yeah, going off of what both of them said, seeing the finished product is very satisfying. I think also for me, just separately, is the people I get to work with and the people I get to work for. And one of the things that I think is very special is I am working with a lot of people who are very successful and who it took a lot of hard work to get to where they are. And so somebody like Pat Riley, I spent my September and October with him this past summer, and it was, I guess, summer and fall, and it was really a cool experience because just working that daily just event like atmosphere and putting all of the hard work and time into these events that I do, and seeing the satisfaction that somebody like he gets, and knowing that he is somebody who has worked hard to get to where he is, and somebody who has high standards and is used to getting the best out of everybody around him, getting that satisfaction, and knowing that it's people who, in my mind, my sports obsessed mind, people like that who I know their opinion matters to me a lot, and getting that satisfaction from them is very satisfying, and it never gets old.
And Justin?
Yeah, so our company mission at the heart of what we work at every day is to improve the health and economic vitality of the communities we serve. And so, communities where we have facilities that provides children the opportunity to be active and healthy. And we know that, studies have shown that active kids and healthy kids grow up to become healthy and active adults, and are more likely to have healthy and active kids themselves. And so there's this multi-generational impact that sports has in the communities we serve and people in general. And so just knowing that the events we're creating and the facilities that we're managing and everyone's role that goes into supporting that mission is having that impact on, hundreds of thousands of people who come through our facilities over the course of the year. And so that's the heart of what we focus on. And working in sports is fun. So from doing the events and managing the facilities, it's always a new challenge, new task, but knowing that there's that multi-generational impact is very rewarding.
So, Brandon, I know you've been talking a lot about the Ryder Cup. I'm kind of looking more towards the future. Going into the 2022 KitchenAid Senior PGA Championship, what is one element that you're most looking forward to?
Yeah, so that event is held at Harbor Shores, Benton Harbor, Michigan, a smaller community where our presenting sponsor, KitchenAid Whirlpool, that's where they're headquartered out of. And the partnership with them was to host at Harbor Shores every other year, starting in 2012, to really help revitalize that community and bring a lot of eyes to that smaller community. And unfortunately, we had to cancel the event there in 2020. So having the 4-year gap from 2018 to 2022, really looking forward to getting back into that community, is knowing that they're starving for that event again. It means so much to them. It's so important to the community that bringing it back and being a small part of that is very exciting and very rewarding. So very much looking forward to that.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. So now, Lauren, what was it like to work closely with other team executives, players, media personnel during time spent and being in the bubble?
It was awesome. It was a really cool experience for me. I think the coolest part was the fact that this was truly the first big event that most of us were attending since the pandemic started. So it was obviously so much planning went into it, but at the same time, it was the first time any of us had ever had an event like this. So having to I don't want to say make up stuff as I went along, but just having to adjust to certain things that I couldn't necessarily predict, and moving forward with them. I think working with the executives and the VIPs was it was really cool to get to know them and to just basically relate to them on the same level, and that we were all trying to stay safe, healthy, and make it a successful event. And it came with a lot of I needed to get them to trust me, and to understand that I wanted to make this event as successful and safe as possible, so that they weren't nervous that somebody around them wasn't tested correctly, or they were at any sort of risk of getting sick, or any sort of risk of the event not succeeding. So it was a lot of, like, events before, maybe they were worried that their car might not be there on time, which is a quick fix. But if I mess up and somebody isn't tested on time, and if like the owner of the Heat isn't able to go to game 6 of the NBA Finals because Lauren messed up and he didn't get his test on time, that would be a horrible thing to happen. So I think working toward gaining that trust over 3 months, and just making them realize that I wanted their success and safety as much as they did was very important. And it was just a very exciting and fun time. And by the end, I definitely started off having the very evenly distributed fandom to all 30 teams. And by the end, I definitely had my favorites, and you might see that one of them might be the Heat, since I've mentioned them twice. But it's just that sort of getting to know people and that sense of community. And even though somebody might be in the league for 50 years and I've been in the league for only 3, we're all in this together, wanting to make this a successful event and wanting to keep everybody healthy. So I think that sense of community was very exciting, and played a big role in the success of the event.
Yeah, I mean, that's great. You obviously mentioned a lot of new things. Doug, we got a lot of new coming with the Kane County Cougars. So what excites you most about the future of the Kane County Cougars, Doug?
That's a great question. So obviously with the changes Major League Baseball, made, we're going from an affiliated team to unaffiliated in one of their, independent partner leagues. If you asked us, is this the way we want it to happen? Obviously not. Kind of came as a little surprise to us, but at the same time, it's going to give us lots of freedom to do some things that maybe we wouldn't have in the past. We're going to have a lot more with the players. The players are obviously, ours now. We're paying them. So we're going to be able to do a lot more with, branding and community events, where we would do that before, but we didn't have that direct control over them. They were hired by the Diamondbacks or, any of the other affiliates we had been with. So it's going to be nice to just open up a few possibilities in terms of a lot more work, especially in the community. The manager we just hired, George Samus, was with the team in St. Paul, Minnesota for 18 years. He really believes in getting the team out into the community, so it's something that he's going to push. And I think that's just going to help, keep us top of mind for everybody, especially in an area like this where it's so competitive. There's so many options for, entertainment that we need to do what we can to, remind people that we're still here. It's going to be our 30th season, this year. So sometimes maybe kind of take it for granted that we've been around that long, and just remind people that we're here. Come on out and see us. And so I think that's kind of the exciting thing, is that it's kind of a chance to, refresh everything we've done, and and make it new again. Try to take a 30-year-old team and make it like, it's one of our first years here.
Absolutely. Yeah, so to kind of build on that, Justin, we know you've mentioned kind of this. So we know you've been able to orchestrate events like the Hype Nation volleyball tournament, Halo Lax, and more. So what is one small thing that makes a big difference in these events?
Yeah, it's a great question. For a little context, with our Halo lacrosse product, Halo Lax, we launched our first event in the fall of last year, and we did that in some states that have some of the tightest restrictions for play. We knew that the restrictions like the back of our hand, we knew what was allowed and how we needed to protect people in order to let them return to play safely. And again, we did that in partnership with U.S. Lacrosse. But to answer the question, the thing that makes the biggest difference is people. And we know at our organization, we win through people. And so, we also have a mindset here that the scoreboard matters. And so everyone has a responsibility and role within the team to help us all be successful and put points on the scoreboard. And so everyone is autonomous in the role and responsible for their role and need to be accountable for those things. All of that grounded in the same guiding principles of how we conduct ourselves personally and professionally and how we go about doing our job together helps us create that culture of winning and putting points on the board. So people is really the biggest point. And, if you have the right people, it allows us to go make some of these challenges we're facing with COVID and otherwise a little bit easier.
Great. Yeah, so obviously kind of within, the operations realm, whether it be through, looking at other teams, other leagues, how do you get creative in order to fill the stands, given all these circumstances? Let's start with Lauren.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely been a challenge. But in Orlando specifically, we had virtual fans. So if you saw on the TVs behind the benches, there were virtual fans behind the benches in both hoops. And those, I think, were hard to come by. Obviously, there were only so many spots available. And so that gave fans excitement if they were able to get one of those seats. So instead of being one in 20,000 attending a game, they were one in maybe 100 being able to virtually attend a game and could watch themselves on TV. So that obviously was always very exciting. And the same thing with just our events that are our games where fans are able to go. Just like I said earlier, trying to give them as regular or normal of an experience as they can and as what is possible. And with events like All-Star Weekend coming up, still having the game, the voting, and getting that fan engagement in social media, while also just working with NBA Cares in the community and physically getting out there, or virtually getting out there and communicating with the fans to get that interaction. And I think just keeping our games as frequent. We don't have much of a choice that they're frequent, but frequent as possible, and keeping that game, the All-Star game next week, keeping it there, having the dunk contest, the skills competition, and just making it as exciting as a regular All-Star game would be.
Next, we'll go to Brandon.
I think being in the golf world, we have a little bit more flexibility than others and not having fixed facilities. So, we look at some of the infrastructure we build out for these events. And you look at a typical hospitality chalet, for example. We can take the walls off of it, make it an open air structure. Looking at local health guidelines, if they won't allow fixed structures, we can open them up. We can go to an open air skybox. We can be flexible with the type of furniture we use. Instead of fixed tip down seats, we can go to a different type of a chair that allows for smaller clusters of groups. So we have that, and with golf, you're outside anyway. So if they don't allow bleachers for everyone to be compacted into one area, we can remove a bleacher and just allow people to spread out more on the golf course around tees and greens and fairways and whatnot. So a little bit more of a flexibility there, but it's all dependent on how how many fans we can have on the property, and we'll just kind of build that infrastructure around them. So that's where we need to get creative, and we have the ability to do so, which is nice.
Justin?
Yeah, I would say similar to Brandon, it's working within the infrastructure that you have. And so certainly with outdoor events, there's like lacrosse, it's a little easier for us to keep people safe and spread people out. Whereas indoor, it's a little more difficult. And so with our indoor events, what may have been a typical 8-10 hour tournament day is now spread out over 12 to 14 hours in the day. So a little harder on us running the event, but it allows us to get more teams and those pods of people moving through the facility and moving through competition. Separate from that, though, I would just say the biggest thing we have is communication. And so communicating pre-event and during the event to all of our participants, families, referees, officials, and facility teams that we're working with, making sure that everyone knows what the policies are and that we're all self-policing to make sure that those things are in place. We had a volleyball tournament, as I mentioned last weekend. There was one person, maybe out of the entire event, who just kind of refused to wear a mask. And it got to the point where parents from the other team were self-policing that guy to put on a mask. And so we all have to be accountable for this. We're all in it together, and making sure that communication of those safety standards and practices are being put out in a timely manner. If you go to our websites, it's the first thing you'll be able to find on the homepage. And so it's baked into our tournament guides. It's baked into our standard operating procedures of running tournaments and post-event as well, and making sure that we've got the best practices for reporting any health concerns that come out of an event.
And Doug.
So, as we prepare for a season where there's, definitely going to be capacity restrictions, I think we're hoping and we're thinking that because people haven't been here for 20 months, that we're going to have a little easier time filling the stadium, just because people have been kind of dying to get out and be part of this again. So I think that kind of, helps us that, if people have been cooped up, they haven't been able to see a baseball game in 20 months, that, they're going to say, okay, once it's available, and as long as I feel that they're, doing it safely, I'm going to be ready to go out. So I think that's kind of what we're thinking is going to happen. Again, like Brandon mentioned, we're an outdoor facility mostly, other than the suite level we have upstairs, which is helpful. Unlike Brandon's events, where they can kind of spread them out across 18 different holes and tee box and greens and all that. We've got those fixed seats, so yes, it is a little bit different to kind of have to plot it out inside of the stadium, whether it's in the seating areas, in the closed suites areas. We've got a bunch of, big picnic decks basically around our outfield that take up almost the entire outfield. So we'll have to kind of balance that, make sure that we show people that we're doing this correctly. But I think, we're just going to remind people that you haven't seen us in 20 months. This is your chance. Let's get back out and, hype up that, with capacity restrictions, these things are going to sell out, quicker than they have in the past. So make sure you get those tickets now, and, don't miss out, because the days of, at least for this year, the days of people walking up to the ticket window to buy tickets the day of the game, that's probably not going to happen for a lot of these events. If you don't buy it ahead of time, unfortunately, you're going to be out of luck. So we're going to have to do a good job about not only selling it that way, but getting the word out that if you don't purchase in advance, don't drive up, because it's you're probably not going to like the answer.
There's a lot of great, interesting answers. So obviously there have been a lot of changes going on. What new challenges have risen as a result of COVID, and more importantly, which do you see staying for good? Let's start with Justin.
Yeah, I would start by saying it's a loaded question. And I think most of us would probably agree from this side is that everything is more challenging in COVID. Every task that may have been not thought of before becomes a little bit more difficult in COVID. And there's always new things popping up that you have to just figure out on the fly and how to do that the best way you can. What I would say, to directly answer the question is that I think the one key thing that's going to come out of this, at least for our teams, is innovation and knowing and figuring out and problem solving on the fly and doing that strategically and doing that safe is going to be something I think a characteristic and a tool that we carry into what will hopefully be a post-pandemic scenario pretty soon.
Lauren?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges, obviously, is not being able to physically be together and collaborate. But I think one of the positives that has come out of that is the virtual meetings and virtual communication. And like I was saying before, meetings that might only happen once or twice a year are now happening much more frequently. And with that, those meetings that would happen once or twice a year would be physically at a hotel, where we would have to pay for rooms, pay for catering, pay for just staffing. And that now is just a Zoom link where people don't have to travel. We save a lot of money and we're able to have them more frequently. And if it's a 5-minute meeting, it's a 5-minute meeting. It doesn't matter that somebody flew in from California to New York just for this one meeting, or if it's an hour and a half, then that's fine too, because we're not paying any extra for the space. So I think just opening that world and just being able to adjust to that has actually given us an outlook to how we can be more efficient and how we can save money and make it all more worth everybody's time.
Doug?
Yeah, I want to start by echoing what Justin said at the start. I mean, we could probably have a 4-hour discussion on this and still not cover everything. Right now, after having lost an entire season, we're just getting back to getting our staff back. Obviously, one of the challenges, with no games, no revenue and all that was just to survive to be here now. And, last March 19th, we had 27 people on our full-time staff, getting ready for a season that was 3 weeks away. By 5 p.m. on the 20th, we had 5 employees because we just had to, furlough everybody we thought was going to be for a short time. Obviously ended up being longer than that. They're just coming back in right now. A few of them started this week. Majority of them will start next Monday on March 1st. And we're going to be 2.5 months from opening day, 2 months from our, little spring training with players here at the stadium. So it's, because of all these things that, are new and evolving, you're doing probably even more work with less people sometimes, just because every one of these conversations is not just how do we do concessions, but it's how do we do concessions with COVID? How do we do, autograph sessions with COVID? How do we, so there's just everything that, it just has a second layer of conversation to it. That everything we did before is stuff we still want to do. That's probably the same for all of us. We were always about, in stadium, fireworks and run the bases and giveaways and on-field games and contests. We've got all those inflatable rides and games. And one of the questions I always get is, what are you going to do about those? That's a good question. We don't know yet. What are going to be the guidelines on that? So there's just, everything is just, what have we done before? What did we want to change it to? but what does it have to change to align with what we're all currently going through? So it just makes everything, twice as difficult to plan for, discuss. And that's not even, including how much more is any of this going to cost. For some of these, there's an extra cost. Some of these you can, work around without extra cost. I mean, we were lucky enough, as Brandon had said, we have switched everything. We're on, Google Sheets. So, we were able to do all the meetings. Our CRM was in the cloud. Everything was there for that already, but there's other things that are going to be an additional cost. And, it's just trying to balance all of that is an amazing task.
And Brandon.
Yeah, I'll kind of echo that in some of the more detailed challenges we have. You look at things like busing. If we have our general parking lot is offsite and we have to bus everyone in, how do we space people out on the buses and get better airflow in there? Our food service from a corporate side, moving away from the traditional buffet lines to more of the grab and go single packaged foods with less touch points. Our merch tent, not packing thousands of people inside a large merchandise tent and pivoting to more of a virtual or online option for them. But there are some positives in all of this. I think this has also kind of sped up our timeline and forced us to work on things that we wanted to that just haven't come to fruition yet, of like mobile tickets, getting away from the paper tickets, doing everything on your phone when you arrive, or mobile food ordering and reducing the amount of time you spend queued at a concession stand and being able to order and pick up. It goes back to our flexibility with the build out at a golf tournament. We can make those changes and build the concession stands and food service accordingly to help support those. And even going to a cashless event and looking at what it takes to just reduce the interactions with cash. So there are certainly a lot of challenges, but I think in the long run, there are going to be some positives that came out of this and will help streamline some of the operations of our events.
Great. So now moving into the Q&A portion. Whoever wants to hop in and answer, please feel free to do so. This will be our last question as well. How do you plan to regulate player interactions with spectators and media at future events?
I'm happy to start. We have a pretty good example with our PGA Championship last year that was held with no fans. We did a virtual media center. It was all held online. We had a small presence on the golf course with our staff that were there conducting in an open air tent where the player would come in and they would jump on a Zoom call. And all of our credentialed media had access very similar to this, where our staff would then unmute them, and then they were able to ask their question virtually on a screen right in front of the player. And it seemed to work really well. And I think it's something that's going to get implemented at our events. It's more of a hybrid method where we'll still have some people, credentialed media on site, but also a virtual presence. And that allows us to have more media cover the event that might not want to take on the expense of traveling to each and every golf tournament.
We announced our new manager the other day, and instead of it being an in-person press conference, it was a Zoom press conference, the new normal for that. I'm sure that will be a part of what we do, although for all of us with spectators and media, we're a minor league team, so the media covering us isn't, a large crush of them, hanging around LeBron James, locker to get a quote. For us, obviously quite a bit different, but, just a little thing. After every game, we always have one of the players go into our team store and sit there to sign autographs and take pictures with the fans. Kids love it. These aren't, major league stars, but they're hoping they will be, and they just love getting up and close with an athlete. It's going to be interesting. Do we do that this year? We probably can with, lining them up and they can come get an autograph with masks, obviously, but are they going to be able to do photos with them. That's probably not a great optic if we do a lot of that. So there's a lot of things that we have to consider, with that. But that's the draw of sports, is that interaction, and having people high-fiving players, coming off the field and all that. So it's something that we'll definitely have to work on.
Great. So first off, I just want to thank our panelists for being here today. Thank you for taking time out of your day. We really appreciate, your insight, and we're excited for the future to see where things go with operations. Next, I'd like to thank all those attending. We appreciate, you joining us today. Hope you learned a little bit. Next up, coming up here in a couple minutes, we have our fireside chat with Dr. Phil Essin from St. Thomas University. So yes, thank you all for joining us. We hope to see you soon.
Thank you. Glad to be
Thank
here.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you guys hear me? Yeah. Now it works. This must be the